Half a day, everyone. This is my Lola, um, and she's got something to share with us. First of all, how old are you, and when were you born?
I was born in 1930, May 28, 1938.
And you were born here in Guam.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, here in the Ganya.
yes, uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and you were a kid during World War II when the Japanese invaded the island.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was about 5.5 years old. And our first experience was my grandma, my nana, and I were at church in Agana, and because it was a feast day of our patron saint of Guam, which is the Santa Maria and Carmelin. And what happened is it was announced by the priest, that to leave and get shelter somewhere because the Japanese were bombing Sumai, which is currently the big navy. And so we got out of church real fast. My grandmother was dragging me along. Let's go, let's go. So we came home, and then I remembered my grandfather. My grandparents actually have a ranch, and so at the time we were living in Agania. So my grandparents have a ranch near the mountain, and the place is called Etton, Etton. And so we all vacated the Agania house and went up to near the mountain at my grandparents' ranch. It was a beautiful ranch house, and there are all kinds of fruit trees and vegetables, and they have a creek close by where I even go. Actually, I went with my grandfather, and he taught me how to catch shrimps in the creek, which is right close to the house. And so that's my experience in that area, that's how I knew about the ranch of my grandparents. And then it was a big ranch house, and so we have neighbors that came over to our place, which is the ranch. And so what I really remember was there's about three families. Hi, Kasia. Three neighborhood families that came over and stayed in our ranch house. But what we did actually is we were praying the rosary. And from what I really remember was while we were praying, a mortar, which I don't know where it came from, came in the open vent of the house and exploded in the house. And it instantly killed my grandfather and injured my aunt, who died the next morning. And then there's several people who were injured from the blast. But my father and his brother were kneeling right, with my grandfather in the middle of them. And so it was just a hectic day, actually, because it seemed like everybody got hurt or some kind of injury from the explosion of the motor. And my mom had shrapnels hit her heel because we were all kneeling.
Mhm.
And my brother then was also, he's about 3.5 or 4 years old, and he got injured also. And so it was just a day or two to take care of everything that happened in that house. And then we were told that we need to go and march to Maniangon, which is where the concentration camp is for
Mm.
tomorrow. And while we were going up, well, actually, the first thing that happened was my uncles and my dad buried my grandfather, and just close to the place, the house, and also my aunt who died because she was hit on her side. And so after the funeral, that's when we all started marching up to Maniangon. That's what the place is called, and that became the concentration camp. So we marched. It was a long, long march. And of course, we were carried by our uncles and father and some relatives that came along with us. So they were helping our parents with us small kids. So it took a long time before we got up to the concentration camp. And then, the Japanese soldiers started hoarding out the people, sending them to concentration camps. I think their intention there was to kill everybody. And so what I remember the most is we were in that concentration camp, and it just happened that there's no shelters, but this banyan trees that it was a lot of help for us because it has huge roots that form like dividers for families that are staying in that area. So we got our own little cave, not cave, but the root,
Mm.
part of the root. It's one of the dividers. And so we shared there. We stayed for a while, you know, and the Japanese really invaded the island. And as children, we just played around, with the other kids. There's so many of us.
Mhm.
And alongside was a river, and it was it was nice because people can bathe in the river and even do their laundries. But it was such an experience. So later on, when the Americans came, they landed close to the area where we are in the concentration camp. And as they march, they march up to the camp and started gathering the children. All the kids were gathered there. And I remember being one of those children because I had a sty in the back of my neck,
Mm.
and I was just taken by the Marines and they treated my sty. But other than that, I remember very well because we were young and all we do really is just play around with the rest of the kids. But then, the Japanese were pretty mean, really. And that's all I can relay about our experience during that Japanese occupation. Because the Japanese were on Guam for 3 years. And the 3 years, a lot of things happened. They were taking people, to work as laborers
Mm-hmm.
and killing them at the same time. But so many things happen. But wherever we go, there's always Japanese in the bushes, not bushes, but in the jungle. You know how
Mm-hmm.
Guam has heavy vegetation that, you can hide.
Yeah, they can
And
easily get lost in there.
yeah, and so that's what I remember, during that occupation. And then after the occupation, we started being sent home to our places.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we ended up in Agani Heights, where we're at now. Of course, we have a big house, and the Japanese took over our house and they use it as a hospital
Mm-hmm.
for the Japanese, for the wounded Japanese or whoever needed medical attention, I guess. Because when we came back to our house, we tried to fix up our yard, and every time we dug, there's always vials of medicine and bottles of medicine buried, on the ground. And then there was one Japanese guy who occupied the other house close by, and he sort of befriended my mom and was very nice that he gave us rice, cooked rice. And that's because, we're at that hospital, that's our house. And there's so many things that happen, and it's not basically in the order that it happened because during the occupation, they were there for 3 years, we were living in Agania, where my parents have very close family friends too that have houses, so they let us stay in their basement. And during that time, I looked out the window, and I saw Japanese geisha girls.
Mm.
They're all walking down the street,
Wow.
And so because, the Japanese were there for 3 years, you know. So that's part of the thing that I remember. And then another thing I remember very well was when we were living in Agana, my aunt, my dad's youngest sister, brought me with her to go to school. And while we were walking to school, there was a sentry, a soldier. And I didn't know that I'm supposed to bow each time you pass a sentry, or a
Mm.
soldier. So I got slapped by the Japanese because I didn't bow my head, My aunt did, but I didn't. So off we went, followed my aunt to school. But I got that slap on my face. That's really all I can, relay at the moment because it takes a while to think back, when I was about 5.5 or 6 years old during the invasion. So for 3 years, I became 8.5 or 9 years old. We were already, already located us to our area and sent us to school. So that's what I can think of. I'm sorry I can't recall everything.
No, that's okay. That's that's okay. I mean, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that much. Like the geisha girls and the the kind Japanese man that gave you guys rice and you getting slapped by a centurion
Sentry,
sentry.
a guard.
Yeah, those Japanese.
Japanese guard.
Those Japanese. They're just I mean, they're just
They are
what's
really
the word?
mean, you know.
I mean, yeah, but not all of them. I mean, like that one man
I know.
who befriended your aunt.
My mom.
I mean, it's actually true when they say that war is hell, not just for the people who fight in wars, but also people, also people who aren't soldiers, but they're always affected by it.
Another thing I remembered is during the occupation. You know, because my dad was in the Insular Force, which is the local navy or sailors,
Hmm.
and they took my dad and several of the Guam sailors on this truck, and they were going to be sent over to the big navy now, you know, to board a Japanese ship. They were going to be sent to Japan as prisoners of war.
Mm.
However, my dad and a friend of his jumped the truck. And so the Japanese got mad. So they were already, the rest of the guys, they were told that they were going to look for the family, our family, and they're going to kill, you know, because my dad escaped and his friend. So that's when we started going up the mountain again, you know, back to my grandfather's ranch. But and they dug caves, my dad and his friends, you know, and his relatives, brothers. They dug a cave, and that's where we stayed, you know, to keep away from the bombing and the shooting. So that's, you know, that's what I really remember. I wish I can share more, but I don't remember that much anymore. But it was an experience, and I'll never forget as long as I live. And then, you know, with your Lola being in the service, military,
Hmm.
this is after the war now, at present time.
Hmm.
After he retired from the Navy, we were in San Diego. He went to Saudi Arabia for 2 years. And then when he came back to San Diego, he got a job in Japan. So we both went to Japan. We were in Japan for 7 years. So you know, I was working for the commanding officer of the naval supply center there, or depot on the island of Japan. And then they have to, you know, because the Japanese are the guests that usually come into the office. So, and I was a secretary to the commanding officer area. And so they have to send me to Japanese school so I can greet the Japanese officers as they come in to talk to the commanding officer. This is in Japan. And so one time the Japanese invited us to go to Tokyo. So on our way, we were riding on the bus there, and my boss and I were sitting in the front seat of the bus. And then I was talking to him about my experience with the Japanese on Guam. And he said, "Why don't you write a book or have a recording of your experiences on Guam?" And it was really surprising because when we came to Tokyo, they, they invited us into this, like their headquarters building. And I was just shocked at all the things that I never thought would have seen there, you know, when we went to Tokyo. And we went into this, I think it was one of their official residence. So when we went in, they gave us a tour of the building, and they brought us downstairs as I walked down the stairs, I noticed that they had like barracks. They have beds, for the soldiers. You know how barracks are? They're all aligned properly.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a kitchen. And it's just like a typical house, all the conveniences. And that building is where General MacArthur, came in and, toured the place too, I guess. That's when, after the Japanese surrendered, of course, And that's it. I never got a chance to really do do what my boss was telling me, that I should either tape it or write it.
That's
But
that's no, that's what I'm doing right now.
so anyway, it's not as much as I would have given you the information, but time has gone by so much that I. But when I was in Japan working in the commanding officer's office, everybody, of course, are Japanese working for the government, for the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. government, the Navy government.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't know about the war on Guam. All they knew was about the war in China and, some Asian countries.
Mm.
But they didn't know that Guam was invaded by the Japanese. So they were surprised when I mentioned that, they were on Guam. And so we were all good friends. They were so nice to us, because the other secretary with me in the office said, that they didn't know anything about the war on Guam, and that she said that they were working repairing typewriters, and all this kind of stuff that they needed, I guess, for the war, and they didn't know that they were being used for war. So that's it. We stayed in Japan for 7 years, and I really enjoyed it. You know, People are so nice, so friendly. That it was just the opposite of our experience of the soldiers and all.
Yeah, work. Yeah, well, work can really change people.
Yeah, but you know, they said they didn't know they were working for war. You know,
Do you remember Lolo's side of the story? I mean, his experience during World War II. And I do remember him mentioning about his brother-in-laws about to be executed, but they escaped.
oh yeah, that was your Lolos in Manila.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Japanese were in Manila too. So instead of going to concentration, they don't have concentration camps like we had on Guam. And they, your Lolo was very young. He's the youngest, of course, in the family.
Yeah, he was born in Manila too, and he became a U.S. citizen by
Yeah,
joining the
this was
Navy.
later on, after we had your dad.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And here on Guam was when he became a U.S. citizen. But he was in the U.S. Navy from the Philippines. And he was telling me that they're, they're sort of housed at the La Concordia College. And that's right close to their house, their residence. And he said he was usually told to go to the house and get their guns or whatever they needed to protect themselves, while they're in that shelter. That's what he told me about. But that's all I can really think of.